Matt Walsh, how many of these interviews have you done over the past week?
Over the last 3 weeks, I've probably done 20.
How tired are you?
Pretty tired. Pretty
Yeah.
tired. Yeah. But we're not done. We're just getting started.
Yeah, this is it. Well, hey, I want to thank you for inviting us to the black carpet event, red carpet event the other night. It was an absolutely excellent movie. And I don't say that to be nice. I didn't like Lady Ballers. I hope that I would. I don't like the cartoon thing Daily Wire has done. So I wouldn't say this was excellent if I didn't believe it. But my wife and I, everyone came out of that theater saying it was way better than they had even hoped. So congratulations.
Really appreciate that. Thanks. It's great to have you guys there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I heard you say in an interview something like, we didn't put the best bits into the trailer. And when you said that, I thought, I hope that's true, but that might be just something he's coached to say so that people will actually go watch it. I can fully testify that the most cringiest secondhand embarrassment, crazy things were not in the trailer. So, well done.
Yeah. Yeah. We debated. I mean, as you can imagine, what stuff to put in the trailer, and it was really, if I had my way, we probably would have had a total spoiler trailer because I wanted to put it all in there, but they held me back, which is probably for the best.
Yeah, it had David Brent from the British Office levels of secondhand embarrassment. I was chatting with Caleb Robinson at the private after party, and his wife said that her hands were sweating profusely. And I myself just kept making sounds unintentionally just because of how awkward it was. So, you know, they say that Americans can't pull off that type of humor, but you did it. So well done.
Well, take that as a major compliment because that's like my North Star personally of comedy is the British Office.
All right. Am I a racist? In order to know that, I need to know what racism means. So, how has racism traditionally been defined, and what does it mean today, or what have people tried to make it mean today?
Um, well, I mean, traditionally, racism is pretty simple. Racism is you don't like people of other races based on their race, or you think that people of another race are inferior to you in some way because they are a member of that race. I mean, that's traditionally what racism is. That's what racism actually is. So it's kind of simple and easy to know whether you are racist. If you have those feelings about members of another race, then you're racist. If you don't, you're not. Um, but these days, it's taken on a very different meaning. Not taken on; it's been given a different meaning by these academics and these race hustlers and DEI people, and trying to get them to actually define it, to try to tell you what their definition is difficult. They're not very forthcoming in their definition because their actual definition is that racism is an inherently white construct. In fact, it's something inherent to whiteness itself. It's something that all white people are, and no non-white people are. That's what they believe and teach, racism to be these days.
That seems pretty racist to say that because of your race, there's something intrinsically wrong about you that you can't change.
I mean, it's the definition of racism. It's the actual definition, especially, yeah, saying that there's some inherent internal flaw, some inherent moral flaw in members of a certain race is like textbook racism. At least it was textbook racism before they changed all the textbooks. But yeah, it's a racist view. It's a racist against white people. It's dehumanizing and infantilizing for so-called people of color. I think it's degrading to everybody involved, ultimately.
Yeah, and it sounds like you trivialize the great evil that racism actually is when you pretend it's something else and make a meme out of it. Um, the other thing is like slander is also a grave evil, like speaking falsehoods about someone to destroy their character. And if I change the definition of racism and then accuse you of it when you're not, I'm also doing a grave evil. So it seems like there are multiple things being done here. One of them is trivializing the real evil that racism is, and then slandering people. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one of the many problems is that, yeah, racism. I mean, I've gotten this in response to the film. I get it all the time. Are you denying that racism exists? Are you denying that people are? Of course, I'm not denying the racism. Because there could be racist people out there. There could be racist people of all different races. But it is true that because the word racist is thrown around so often now and so lightly and casually, it doesn't really mean, if someone comes to me and says, oh, I was the victim of racism, it doesn't necessarily mean anything, because I have to know, well, actually you were the victim of racism, or were you the victim of quote unquote racism? So there's kind of a skepticism that you have to apply to all of these claims now to an extent that you didn't in the past. And it ends up, you could have people that are actually victims of racism and now are not believed. I mean, it's like with hate crimes. Hate crime hoaxes are so common that when somebody comes along and claims that they were the victim of some kind of hate crime or something like that, your reflexive response is to not believe it. And you can't help it because it's a hoax so often. But every once in a while, somebody might actually be the victim. And now, well, it's like we don't believe you at first either, because unfortunately, there are all these hoaxers out there.
Yeah, it reminds me of how some feminists abuse the word rape.
Yeah.
They might take it to mean if a man looks you up and down, that's a form of rape. And then if you start using the term rape that way, you've just diminished the great evil that actual rape is. We have other words for different, for reasons.
Yeah, it's exactly the same kind of thing. Yeah.
So given how popular you became after your last documentary, how many times did you step into one of these situations, one of these seminars or interviews, and people realized right away who you were, and you had to sort of throw that scene away and not put it in the final cut?
Not often, not nearly as often as you would think, not often as we thought would happen when we started making this, especially with the disguise we use. It's not exactly, it's not the most elaborate disguise. We're not using facial prosthetics and fat suits. And we talked about doing that kind of thing, but it's just too expensive and difficult and takes too much time. So yeah, we didn't know going in. We assumed that I would be recognized relatively frequently. It'd just be something we have to navigate. And it happened very rarely. In fact, one of the first things we shot was a little short scene in a bookstore where I just go to get, some anti-racist literature. And it's one of the first things in the movie. It's one of the first things we shot, sequentially. And I did get recognized there. It was kind of a weird thing where I was talking to I guess it was one of the employees of the bookstore, and she was walking me through, and she's the one on camera. Meanwhile, there was rumblings around us of people saying, that's Matt Walsh, and not happy about it because this is a liberal bookstore. I was waiting for them to just intrude and kick me out. They never did for some reason. And after that experience, we kind of thought, well, it's one of the first things we shot. I got recognized. We thought this is going to be an issue. But it really wasn't much after that. And I think what we discovered is that a lot of these people, they live in such a bubble that, they really aren't, you could be, prominent in conservative media, and it's like they might not have even heard of you because they just don't pay attention to anything that they don't agree with to begin with. And that worked to our advantage.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think a lot of conservative people know who Robin DiAngelo is, but a lot of people on their side didn't know who you were. How did you get the cameras into these places, like that seminar, for example? What did you tell them to be able to get in there?
Yeah, none of it's hidden camera. So that's a misconception, I think, from some. It's not a hidden camera thing. Everybody knows they're on camera. They sign releases, and they knew we wanted. It's pretty simple. They knew we wanted to film one of their seminars. Same thing for Race to Dinner, and they knew we wanted to film a Race to Dinner event, and that's what we did. And they signed the release, and so it's real people. It's a real thing. But yeah, they were aware of the cameras.
So I know you said you couldn't get to the Race to Dinner conversation because apparently you're not a woman, which is a rather bigoted assumption. But so how then did you get a job in the kitchen?
Yeah, I don't want to go into all the
that's fine.
All the nitty gritty on that, but it was once we found out that not only will they allow white men to serve them, but actually they are quite welcoming of that. They encourage that. Then it wasn't too hard to kind of set up a scenario where, I could be one of the people serving them. They didn't, they didn't, let's put it this way, they didn't do background checks on the people serving them. Maybe they will in the future, though.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed too good to be true. I love your ability to stand in an uncomfortable situation and go to 11, because so many times I thought, okay, all right, yeah, that's about as much as I can take. And then to have you come in, and I can say this because it was in the trailer, with a glass of champagne and invite everybody to raise their glass if they're a racist and toast to racists, and they did it. That is outstanding.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite ones to film. We had a lot of fun with that. Well, as much fun as you can when you're in the room with these people, given that, I think that what they're doing is quite evil, and these are some of them quite unpleasant people. But you mentioned the British Office before. Like I said, to me, that's quite a flattering comparison, because I'm a huge fan of that. Like, I guess you can kind of tell when you watch the movie. I'm just the kind of cringe, dry. For me, comedy can never be cringy enough. Like, I just think that stuff is hilarious. Yeah. And so one of the things we wanted to do in this movie is, we have a message we want to get across, and I think that's pretty clear. And we have something we want to expose. I mean, this is a documentary still, because this is all real people. This is a real thing. But also, we want it to be entertaining, and we saw some of this stuff and some of these places as just really good forums for comedy. We just thought it's like, let's kind of put that first. You've got the story, you have the comedy, you need it to be funny, and let's prioritize that. That's the first job, is we got to make sure we're telling the story, and it has to be funny. And all the other stuff is secondary. And I think that, although still very important, but I think this is traditionally in kind of conservative media, and also in Christian films and all of that, one of the mistakes that's been made is you flip that upside down. To my mind, it's upside down, where, well, the message is the most important thing, so let's get the message down. And as long as we have that, then story, entertainment quality, all of that is kind of secondary. And I think that's the way conservatives have approached it for years. And the problem is that you end up not really getting your message across, because it's not high quality entertainment. So no one's watching it unless they already fully agree with you, because you're not putting the story first. And the funny thing is that now, I made the point before that on the left, they're kind of making this same mistake. It's like the left is kind of regressing in a way in terms of their artistic output, where now they're doing this and they're putting out movies where it's pretty clear that the thing they care the most about is getting their message out, their woke leftist message. And then they put things like plot and story and narrative and acting and writing, as a second tier concern, and you can tell based on the product.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy. I've got a question from local supporter Alex, and I think this is a good question. It's one that's probably given to you a lot. Do you see mockery and insults as conducive to solving the issues with the left on most hot button issues? Why or why not?
Definitely. Well, I think my answer's pretty obvious, but yes, I think that it is conducive. I think it's not only conducive, but essential. And I don't mean that everybody should be mocking the left all the time, and that's the only thing we should ever do, but that should be a tool in our arsenal. It should be, or a weapon in our arsenal, rather, tool in our toolbox. It should be something that we do. But this is the other thing, that if you have a healthy kind of movement, not everyone is doing the same thing all the time. And so you have to have people in your movement who are good at certain things and certain approaches, and let them do that. And other people have a different approach. So for me, I like to think that mockery, satire, trolling, whatever you want to call it, is kind of my wheelhouse. I know how to do that. There are other people who they shouldn't even try it because it's not their thing, but they're very good at getting the message across in other ways, in ways that I can't. And so let's have a diversity of tactics, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know that it must have been super awkward enough sitting in front of people you had no respect for in the man bun and the thin rimmed glasses, etc. But you told me that when I saw this commercial and you were sitting in what looked like a bar in the South in front of these good old Southern boys, I just assumed that they were paid actors because I can't imagine how unbearable it would be to walk into a place like that, ask the kinds of questions you were asking when you're like, I don't really mean this. I know this is bullcrap. This is a documentary. So how did that take place?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no, they're not actors, real people. We didn't explain. We 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 didn't want to do something where, like, if we think we're going to agree with you, we tell you what we're up to, um, because then we're not. We want to get your authentic. We want to get an authentic answer. We want to get both because that's more honest. So we've come up with a more honest film, but also it's just better. It's just going to be better. And the other thing is that most people are not actors. That's not something that comes naturally to most people. And so if you tried it, even if we wanted to, if we wanted to coach them and say, look, this is what we're hoping to get out of this. Here's what you should say. It wouldn't work because most people, again, it's just it's not like a natural skill I think that most people have. So you got to just let people respond as they do. Now, yes, it's very awkward. In fact, I think you're right to single out that scene because probably for me personally, that was the most awkward thing that I did. Because it is a different thing when you're in a room with people who you don't respect and you're kind of making fun of their own worldview. You're like creating this cartoonish version of themselves and reflecting it back to them, which is what we do in a lot of the film. That can be awkward too and kind of tense. But when I'm going into a place where I know none of them agree with this, and I'm presenting this version of myself that's complete, like this is not who I am in real life at all. Yeah, it's. I mean, it's embarrassing, right? But we also know that we're making a film. I mean, we did it was similar things in What Is a Woman. It kind of that sequence in Am I Racist is similar in some ways to in What Is a Woman when we went to the Maasai tribe in Kenya
Yeah.
and started asking them about transgender stuff, and they were laughing. A similar thing because they just look at me like I'm a crazy person, and they almost feel sorry for me. And we never told them. Like I left there with them still thinking that I am a hopelessly confused, poor man. And the same thing for that sequence in Am I Racist?
Yeah. My gosh. How many theaters have you sold now? And we're going to be releasing this today and tomorrow, and so it's before the movie releases in cinemas. So yeah, how many theaters have you sold? Is that beating your expectations? And why should people go get a ticket?
It is. It's beating my expectations by exponentially, and I think it's beating anyone's expectations. So right now we're at over 1,500 theaters. By the time it's released, it should be, I don't know, it should be more than that. They're adding theaters by the day. We started around 200-ish, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the funny thing is that we assumed we would run into some pushback getting this into theaters because of the subject matter. And that wasn't the case. That the subject matter actually, to the theater's credit, the subject matter didn't seem to scare them. What scared them, not didn't really scare them, but what made them hesitant, if anything, was just the genre. And this is technically a documentary, and so they said, documentaries are not box office draws. You don't get, they don't make millions of dollars at the box office, so we're only going to give you a few screens. And we had to sell tickets. We had to get a lot of pre-sales to earn our keep early on, and we did. So we expanded to 1,500 screens, and you could still get tickets at miracist.com. And the more we sell in pre-sales, the more people who can ultimately see the movie because we get the more screens.
So did someone approach you with this idea rather than immediately releasing it to Daily Wire Plus that we do this in the theaters? And did you believe that would work?
Yeah, actually, it was our director, Justin Folk, who this was something that he was pressing early on, And he was the first one to bring it up to me anyways. First person I heard this idea from. And initially I was definitely skeptical. And pretty nervous about it because, I mean, his point from the beginning was, look, there's a scoreboard when you're in the box office. Nobody can deny the box office. If you have a big success with a film on Daily Wire platform, for example, like we did with What is a Woman, it's great, but nobody can see that. And so they have to kind of take your word for it when you tell them that this was a huge smash success, which What is a Woman was. But again, like no one has any framework for that. They don't really, but when you're in box office, if you have a success, then everyone can see it. There's no denying it. And that's just going to amplify the cultural impact of the film. Of course, so he made that case to me, and I said, well, that's appealing. The flip side of that is that if you do terribly and you flop, then that's also on the scoreboard that everyone can look at, and that's a huge embarrassment. But that's the risk, and it hasn't come out yet. We'll see what happens, but pre-sales are going really strong, and so it's certainly a risk. I think it's a calculated and smart risk, but you've got to. This is a thing with conservatives. We get in our, we're in our little like ghettos, and we like to stay in our little areas, which I understand, but at a certain point, you have to break beyond that and be willing to just go into mainstream culture and say, hey, here we are. Here's this thing that we made, guys. What do you think of it? And it's I get it. It's a scary thing to do that, but we have to if we want to actually compete in the culture.
One of the most difficult scenes to watch was your interview with Robin DiAngelo. So how did that come about? And if you don't mind me asking, how much did she charge you?
Yeah, she. So we $15,000, if I remember correctly. It's in the movie, as you know. We put all the price tags on the screen so everyone can see, because this is part of the story that we're telling. These people are grifters, in it for the money, in my opinion. So $15,000 was her fee. And what was the first part of the question? How do we get her in the film?
Yeah, I guess I want to know, like, okay, so they booked it. That must have been awesome to realize this is going to be in a way the climax to the film. What was it like walking in there, meeting her? Presumably, there's a lot that wasn't put on the film in which you had to make her feel comfortable so that she would open up to you. Like, what was that whole experience like?
Yeah, it was pretty tense, and it was a long conversation. I probably talked to her for a couple of hours. And we have, I don't know, the spoilers are all out there, but I don't want to, I don't want to give, I don't want to, I'm pretending that they're not, so I'm not going to talk about spoilers, but we did have, in that, we knew that when we filmed that we wanted this to be kind of our third act, climax. And so we knew we needed to do it. I didn't want to just go and sit and talk to her. We needed to do something. We needed to like take this somewhere. We wanted it to build to something. But in order to get there, then you've really got to buy credibility with these people. And the way that it's got a similar thing with What is a Woman, for all those interviews in both movies, it really, it's like whatever you see there was probably an hour before that of just total fluff. I'm not challenging at all. I'm just asking a bunch of fluffy questions. I'm bored out of my mind. I'm just trying, you got to make them feel comfortable and get them in a flow. And then after a while, they start to feel like, okay, well, this person, I'm in a safe space here. This person obviously is very credible and interested. And once you get that, then you can start getting honest moments. But it does take, in both films, there are interviews that, well, there's plenty of stuff that doesn't make it in the movie because it's only 90 minutes or, 100 minutes.
I'm hoping for a blooper reel.
Right. There's a lot of that, but there's also, there's in both films, I can think of cases where I made the strategic mistake of going into something and kind of being impatient and just wanting to get right to the good stuff. And when you do that, it's jarring and they clam up and they shut down and they're just not going to be honest with you.
So you had to do what nobody thought you could do: be charming.
Charming is a strong word. At least In a way, I mean, it's because it's easy to be charming with these sorts of people. Charming to them just means that you agree with them. That's all. To charm them, all you need to do is agree and say that you know the buzzwords. You say those, and you act like you're interested in their BS ideas, and you can charm them all day long. So yeah, I guess so. In a way, charming.
Do you think that there was anybody in the film who doesn't yet know they're in this huge film?
Um,
Does that make sense? Like they didn't know they were going to be put into this massive documentary. Do you think do you think they all know, oh crap, I'm in this documentary that these right-wing fundamentalists are putting out?
Yeah, I think at this point, just because of the trailer and some of the clips that have been put out, they know that they're in it. Now they might not know exactly what part of our exchange and our experience together made it into the film, so they might not know that. And we, so far, well, actually, this is breaking news. Kate Slater, who's in the film, first person we talked to. Yeah, she's finally, we have one person in the film who's come out and denounced the film. That just happened. She posted on Instagram. She called the film a piece of crap, but she didn't say, she used the more inappropriate word, and said that she's gone off the radar. And she deleted her Twitter account, her X account as well. So,
whoa,
we got that. We still have not heard from Robin DiAngelo, and I think maybe after the movie premieres and people have seen that scene and are talking about, maybe one moment in particular, she might finally feel the need to say something. But the truth is that there's not a lot that these people can say because, like, if they could accuse us of deceptively editing it or making it seem like they said and did things they didn't really say and do, then they certainly would come out and say that. But we didn't do that. I mean, it's all there. This is them in all their glory, and there's not a lot they can say.
Right, you had them sign contracts.
Yeah, everybody signed waivers. Yep.
Waivers. So were they just under the impression that you were doing a documentary about race? The correct assessment.
Yeah, well, exactly. We were doing a documentary on race and related issues, which is what we were making. It's what we have out. It's called Am I Racist?
I'm sure everybody has told you this, but there was such a heartwarming moment in the middle of that film, right? Because it starts out like secondhand embarrassment, and then it's just so beautiful and uniting for America. Some of those interviews, especially that fella in the garage, I was almost in tears watching that. And then you took the back of my head and you thrust it into secondhand embarrassment to the point that I couldn't breathe. So it was the flow of the movie was excellent. Like, I don't know much about making movies, but I know this one was like second to none as far as how it was put together.
Well, I appreciate that, and I wish I could take credit for the flow part of it but I can't really. That's all Justin Folk, our director, and Marshall, our main editor on the film. I mean, so much. Movies in general, I've kind of realized as I've gotten into a little bit that you just, until you get into it, you don't realize how much, it seems obvious, but you don't realize how much of making movies happens after the cameras are off. And especially with something like this, when there's just so much raw footage. And we had many cuts of this film. We had a first cut of the film a year ago that was not great, and even maybe not good, at least by our standards. Even though a lot of the material is kind of the same, but it's just like the flow wasn't there because we hadn't gotten it down in the editing yet, and you got to just go in. And once you figure out, it's like there's a certain, it's a symphony in a way that you're conducting. But again, I'm not doing that. That's other people.
Yeah.
But
I think it's keep going.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that your documentary, What is a Woman, changed the conversation about trans ideology, child mutilation for children, etc. So what do you hope this video accomplishes?
Of course, we hope to, and I think we do in the film, expose the DEI, the not just DEI, but the so-called anti-racist hustle in general, expose it for the absurdity that it is, So we hope to do that. We hope that people come away from it. You mentioned that middle section of the film and some of the people that we talked to in that, and just normal people, black and white, who have, who have not been touched by this DEI stuff, and have, I think, just a healthy. These aren't not perfect saints or anything, but these people, but just normal people, and they have a healthy kind of attitude about race. And if people come away more with that attitude, then I think it's great. But also, even aside from the race and the DEI issue, I hope that it continues a trend of conservatives getting into, entertainment. And we're obviously not the first movers at all in terms of conservatives in the theaters. I mean, many of people, Angel Studios has been doing it quite successfully. But so we're part of a trend that had already started, and I hope that continues as well.
When I came here from Australia, my wife and I got married. We were living in Ireland, Canada. When we came back in 2012, I remember feeling that there was a concerted effort to accuse me and my friends of being racist. And I remember thinking, am I crazy? Like, that seems so weird. Like, and I was even embarrassed to bring it up in case maybe that was racist, and I was second guessing myself. And I thought if I said, well, I'm not a racist, they told me that was proof that I was one. It's I think a really kind of, it's a very disgusting, manipulative tactic to make people feel guilty about things they haven't done so that you can then make them do what you want them to do. And that's what it seems to me is being done in this country. And I think that this excellent documentary is going to be a sort of antidote to that. So when I show my teenage son and daughter this, they'll see the insanity of it for what it is. And the next time someone comes around and tries to accuse them of being something that they're not, they can tell them to please go to hell. So I think that's what a big boon from this documentary is going to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the right message for such people. You're also right. It's interesting that you say 2012 because as someone who's lived in America the whole time, it's always seemed to me, and I'm not the only one. I mean, many people have remarked on the seeming irony that we had a black president, obviously elected in 2008, and after his first term, really in the middle of his first term, it seemed like "quote unquote" race relations started to plummet, which is I guess what naive people would have expected, exactly the opposite when you have your first black president. And that's not a coincidence. I think that was a deliberate thing by a lot of the people who are behind this agenda, and they had to ramp it up after Obama was elected because, normal people would look at the election of a black man. I mean, I didn't vote for him. I didn't want him to be elected because I think his politics were terrible. But a normal person would look at that and think, okay, well, even if I don't like him, at least we can say about this that it's pretty good evidence that systemic racism is not really an issue in America anymore, now that there's a black guy at the top of the system. But I think the race hustlers realized that Americans would make that connection and were worried about that because this is such a racial guilt and resentment is such a potent tool for them to use. And so really they had to redouble their efforts because of Obama's election. They had to redouble their efforts to convince Americans that they are racist, which I think when you got here 2012 is kind of what you were, it's like they were right. It's like right when they were first kind of ramping that up and that's what you were picking up on, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, just the final question. Tell people why, I mean, you already said it, but let's do it again. Why is it important that people go right now to your website, which I don't want to screw up, so I'm going to have you say it in case I get it wrong, and buy a ticket? AmIRacist.com is the website. Well, there's two reasons. One of the first reason that I often say that maybe should be the second reason, but if you want more movies like this in theaters, if you want movies that reflect our values as conservatives, then you got to support the movies that when they show up. It's the only way that you get more of them. But the second reason is that I believe it's actually a good movie and it's entertaining. And so when I say support, I don't mean it in a charitable sense. Right. I think it's for your investment, we will deliver an entertaining time at the theater, and you can walk away, with all these maybe taking a good message from it, but
actually, feeling entertained, and that's what we hope to do.
Well, a big thanks to you and to the director, the editors, all the hard work your team put into making this happen. Thanks for coming on the show as well.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.